What is up, guys? This is RMD Tech, and today we're going to be looking at a little known graphics card called the Radeon HD 5450. Now, if you guys don't already know, this is a very low power, reasonably old graphics card that was never really designed to play games. However, today we're going to be breaking that mold and we are going to be trying to play some more modern titles on it. So without further ado, how about we get into that video? This is the Radeon HD 5450 by AMD, released in February of 2010 and was developed on the Terascale 2 architecture and has a total of 292 million transistors. Since this card was released in 2010, we actually get pretty reasonable support for modern graphics technologies, natively supporting DirectX 11, OpenGL 4.4, as well as shader model version 5. This means that the majority of modern games will run on this card, technically speaking anyway. The FPS may disagree, but more on that later. The 5450 has 512 MB of onboard DDR3 memory, running at an effective 1 GHz speed. The GPU clock, on the other hand, is running at 650 MHz, so like many of the graphics cards I review, this won't be running the latest games at 4K, but it certainly will be able to play some lesser demanding games. Even in 2010, when this card was released, reviewers weren't advising using this card for the latest 3D titles, instead using it for media PC usage. But where's the fun in that? So here we are in 2019, it's time to test some games. My test system used an i5-4690 non-K variant, as well as 8GB of DDR3 memory. This way our GPU should be the only bottleneck in the system. I often use GTA 3 to test my graphics cards, and so I thought I'd start off with that again. And in fact, since this card was released almost 8 years after Grand Theft Auto 3, it has absolutely no problems running it. Running at 1080p high, we were able to achieve a maximum FPS of 74, as well as an average FPS of 53, and only ever dropping as low as 43 FPS. But there's no fun in running games that the card can obviously run, and so from now on, we're going to be looking at some more modern titles. Far Cry 3 was one of my favourite games to play on the Xbox 360, and since I had a copy on the PC, I thought this might be a good game to run. Now, it certainly wasn't the best experience I've ever had, but running at 720p low, I was able to play the game well enough to at least be able to almost aim at the enemies. Dropping to lows of 11 FPS with an average of 16 FPS and actually peaking at about 28 FPS. CSGO is a largely CPU driven game, but having a decent graphics card is still important. In fact, in our test system, we were able to achieve a minimum FPS of 17, far better than what we saw in Far Cry. Our average FPS was 30, this is the least I would be looking for to play the game comfortably, and we even saw a maximum FPS of 63. So if you wanted to, you could definitely play some CSGO at 720p low on this machine. I feel like I might have been perhaps a bit optimistic with this next game. In fact, I was definitely asking a lot of this GPU, but Wreckfest was the next game to be tested. It's a really great game and I'd recommend you guys check it out, however I certainly wouldn't recommend playing it on this specific graphics card. Dropping to the lowest possible settings, which happen to be 720p low, this game absolutely annihilated this card. The maximum FPS we saw was just 15 frames per second, achieving an average FPS of 10 frames per second and dropping to a minimum of only 8. We didn't even achieve double figures on that one. Finally, everybody's favourite game, Minecraft. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. Again, this is a largely CPU intensive game, but it does remain important to have a decent graphics card. In Minecraft 1.14.2 at 1080p with fancy lighting and 12 rendered chunks, we only ever dropped as low as 35 frames per second, sustaining averages of 57 FPS and even going as high as 77 frames per second. But now it's time for us to come to a conclusion. And unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to agree with the people back in 2010 who reviewed this card. They were right. Even back then, this graphics card was not good for playing 3D games, and it definitely hasn't gotten any better. It hasn't aged like a fine wine, and so I can't recommend it for playing games. But they did definitely have a point when they said that this could be used for a media PC. This graphics card is definitely capable of running 1080p 60fps videos, and so I could recommend it for an application like that. However, at the same time, so are the majority of integrated graphics cards. In fact, the i5-4690 that I used in this system, the integrated HD graphics by Intel on that actually performed better than this card in the majority of cases, and so the graphics card was actually holding us back. We could have used the onboard graphics and actually had a better, smoother experience. So, would I recommend buying this graphics card for just the £10 or so that it costs? The answer is definitely no. I wouldn't recommend buying this graphics card, and instead probably go with just something like a Ryzen 2200G. You definitely get better performance in both games and just CPU performance, and it's just overall a better idea. However, if you are on an incredibly low budget and you can't afford a CPU like that, you're using something like a Core 2 Duo and you only want to play games from the mid-2000s, then perhaps you could use this graphics card. But outside of that use case, I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Now, if you have found this video useful or you have enjoyed it, then please do be sure to leave a like. And if you do have any comments or questions or anything like that, then please do be sure to either hit me up on Twitter or leave a comment in the comment section down below. But outside of that, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.